Hurricane Priscilla, also referred to as Priscilla in some media outlets, developed over the waters of the Mexican Pacific during the first days of October 2025. Its evolution was relatively quick, reaching hurricane strength, fluctuating between Category 1 and 2, before approaching the Mexican coastline. The system moved northwest, running almost parallel to Mexico's western coast without making direct landfall in many areas. This path allowed it to remain over warm waters, fueling heavy rainfall and coastal flooding in neighboring states. At its peak intensity, Priscilla produced sustained winds exceeding 140 kilometers per hour, about 87 miles per hour, and gusts reaching up to 170 kilometers per hour, around 105 miles per hour in some reports. Rainfall totals of up to 250 millimeters, nearly 10 inches, were expected in several coastal regions of western Mexico. The states most affected or at risk included Jalisco, Colima, Nayarit, Michoacán, Guerrero, Sinaloa, and Baja California Sur. Federal and state authorities issued alerts for heavy rainfall, thunderstorms, strong winds, high surf, and the potential for landslides and flash floods. Ports along several stretches of the Mexican coast were closed to small vessels. Classes and public activities were suspended in vulnerable coastal areas, and civil protection protocols were activated. Residents were urged to avoid swollen rivers, flood-prone zones, and crossing streams during high water. Rainfall was one of the storm's most significant impacts. Extremely heavy downpours were recorded across western states, causing urban flooding, river swelling, and the overflow of creeks. In some localities, soils already saturated from previous rains worsened the situation, limiting water absorption and leading to sudden runoff, an effect commonly seen in similar events. In coastal waters, waves between 5 and 6 meters, 16 to 20 feet, high were reported off Jalisco, Colima, and Michoacán. Strong surf and dangerous currents affected small boats and port infrastructure. Some coastal areas had to be evacuated due to the threat of flooding from storm surge. The intense rains also saturated slopes and hillsides in mountainous zones, increasing the risk of landslides and mudslides, especially in regions with fragile soils or prior deforestation, a situation likely already occurring in some affected areas. Among the expected aftermaths were damage to secondary highways and rural roads with sinkholes, washouts, or blockages caused by mud and debris. Small bridges, urban drainage systems, and sewage networks could become overwhelmed or damaged, complicating transportation and delaying runoff of accumulated water. In coastal and rural areas, homes with weak structures, light roofs or unreinforced materials, suffered partial or total damage, losing roofs, windows, and interiors to flooding. Household items such as furniture and appliances often became unusable after exposure to water. Some families likely needed temporary relocation to shelters due to uninhabitable homes or unsafe conditions. Access to essential services such as clean water, electricity, and sanitation was disrupted, increasing social vulnerability. Flooding can also foster the spread of disease-carrying vectors like mosquitoes and rodents, raising the risk of waterborne and insect-borne illnesses. The persistent humidity inside homes may cause respiratory and sanitation problems. Economic sectors such as agriculture, fishing, and coastal tourism were among the most vulnerable. Crops near rivers and hillsides were flooded or washed away. Artisanal fishing suffered losses of boats and equipment, and tourist infrastructure experienced cancellations and damage. Both state and federal governments are expected to allocate emergency funds for reconstruction, direct aid to victims, and repair of damaged infrastructure. Targeted protection programs, agricultural insurance when active, and rapid response emergency funds were to be deployed. Reconstruction will involve more than simply rebuilding. It will require mitigation efforts, such as strengthening housing structures, improving urban drainage, reforesting watersheds, and better land management to reduce future risks. Even after the hurricane's passage, risks persist. Renewed river flooding, subsequent rains destabilizing already weakened soils, and secondary effects like coastal erosion. Communities with fewer resources will face greater challenges in recovery. The poorest and most rural municipalities with the least developed infrastructure suffer the worst consequences, as they have limited preparedness or disaster insurance. This deepens social and economic disparities between urban centers and marginalized regions. Hurricane Priscilla underscores the urgent need to strengthen early warning systems, effective evacuation plans, resilient construction, and integrated watershed management. It also demonstrates that extreme weather can cause severe damage even without the storm's eye directly making landfall. As more precise damage assessments become available, geographic, hydraulic, and structural studies will be necessary to refine prevention policies. Involving local communities in recovery and adaptation efforts will also be essential. Ultimately, Hurricane Priscilla represents a storm combining intensity, persistent rainfall, and significant coastal risk. The aftermath encompasses physical, social, economic, and environmental damage. Recovery in affected areas will depend on the speed of official response, community participation, and the consistent application of climate resilience and adaptation strategies. Although many consequences remain to be fully quantified, it is clear that rebuilding will be a long and complex process.
El mar está enojado por el huracán que anda frente a las costas aquí de los cabos, mis amigos. Vete, Chiromán, vete.